Thank you guys for attending. I'm just really honored that you chose to take some time out of your incredibly busy schedules to join me. I hope that you find this useful. You are all here because you're interested in learning how to get your kids to listen without yelling. And that's what we're going to be diving into. A little bit about myself. I am a licensed psychologist and board certified behavior analyst. I live in the Bay Area in California, and I own a private practice out here that's called Focused Behavioral Solutions. In my practice, I work with families whose children engage in challenging behaviors of all different sorts, from tantrums or non-compliance around bedtime, or just general difficulty with listening or disruptive behavior. And I'm working with the families on teaching them how to implement strategies to address those behaviors. And I just thought that it was so important to reach out to parents right now with these difficult times that we're going through, and to put together some resources for you guys. So I hope you find this useful. And before I dive into the content, just a quick disclaimer. So even though I am a licensed psychologist, the webinar is really intended for just informational purposes. So just because you're attending, it doesn't mean we're now part of a therapeutic relationship, but I really do encourage you to reach out to someone for support. There are professionals out there who can help you with whatever you're going through, and now is not the time to kind of struggle with that by yourself. So, all right. Speaking of just the difficult times that we're in, I wanted to start by showing you guys this quote. This is from Dr. Alissa Coyne. She is also a psychologist that works with families, and she put out a letter recently, and I think she said it much better than I could. And just to speak to some of the challenges that parents are going through right now. So it says, "You parents are not superhuman. You cannot do all the things, nor should you. It's okay to let go of being the perfect parent, of giving 110% all the time, of pushing yourself beyond the physical and mental capabilities. It's okay to give yourself a break and to be gentle with yourself." And I think she said that really eloquently. And it's really important for parents to kind of take a step back from everything that's going on and to recognize that these are really challenging times, and that it's unrealistic for you to expect yourselves to be perfect. Going along with the title of this presentation, you're here because you might be concerned about how often you're yelling at your children. And I'm going to say something, and I hope you're able to soak it in, but just because you yell, that does not make you a bad parent. So maybe just sit on that for a moment. Like, yelling does not mean that you're a bad parent. It just means that you're human, and that there are times when you get frustrated. And now more than ever, I think it's just so important for you to try to be gentle with yourself and to try to practice some self-compassion. You are probably reading about how important it is to practice self-care right now. And for some of you, that might feel like just one extra thing to add to your to-do list that you're not going to get around to, and it can seem even more stressful than it is a relief. So I want to show you a little exercise. We'll try to participate in it together. And this is something that you could practice throughout your day that really doesn't have to take any additional time. So if you're willing, we're going to practice a little mindfulness exercise. And I recognize that this can be uncomfortable to participate in a large webinar. Just putting my own feelings out there, I'm also uncomfortable leading this over a webinar. It's much easier when I'm in a room with people and can see you face to face, but that's okay. So if you guys are willing, I invite you to participate and to close your eyes. So wherever you are, we're just going to take a moment. You might be sitting down, maybe you're standing, or if you're lucky, you might be lying down, taking a moment for yourself. You might be in a room by yourself, or maybe you're surrounded by your children or your partner. Wherever you are, we're just going to acknowledge that that's the moment you're in right now. And when you're ready, I want you to draw your attention to your breath. You don't need to try to control it. I just want you to get curious about your breath and pay attention to it. So how does it feel right now when you're breathing in and out? Are you breathing fast or slow? When you breathe in, do you feel your chest rise and fall? Or maybe it's more in your abdomen. Where do you feel your breath in your body? And maybe you can even think about what your breath sounds like. As you're inhaling and exhaling, what noise does your breath make? And we'll just sit here wherever you are and take a couple more deep breaths together. Okay, and when you're ready, we'll come back as a group and you can slowly open up your eyes and just kind of settle into the space wherever you are right now and just see if you notice a difference. Are you maybe a little bit more calm now than when we first joined the webinar? I think I am. Or maybe you're feeling frustrated that you weren't able to give your full attention to that exercise. Or maybe you felt uncomfortable. Wherever you're at, just acknowledge that. If you found some benefit from that, I just really encourage you to practice mindfulness or those breathing exercises throughout the day. And I love them because it's something that you can set some time aside to do on its own, but you can also practice them while you're doing anything else. So maybe you're washing the dishes and you set an intention to just focus on your breathing while you're washing the dishes. Or maybe it's while you're doing the laundry. Or maybe it's even while you're playing with your children, you want to take a couple breaths just paying attention to where you're at in that moment. Now, my hope is that that's something that you can practice. It doesn't seem like another chore that you have to do, and you can really fit it into your day seamlessly. We're also going to come back to the benefits of mindfulness and just paying attention to where you're at, and I'll show you how that ties into some of the strategies that we'll be discussing later on. Yeah. All right. To begin, you are here probably because you have some concerns about your child and how often they're listening to you. Non-compliance is just a fancy word for when your child doesn't listen to you. So let's all just recognize that non-compliance is completely normal. This is just something that all kids are going to go through as part of their development. The research on this is slightly mixed, but overall, you would find that the chances of your children listening to you is going to increase as your children get older. We might find that 2-year-olds are listening on an average of maybe 30% of the time, which really is not much. So this is a new skill that they're just developing, and they're kind of exerting their own independence at that age. 5-year-olds, we might expect to see them listening about 70% of the time, and school-age children maybe about 80%. But if you're outside of those ranges, you're not doomed. Just remember that we should not be expecting our children to listen 100% of the time. That's just not a realistic expectation for you to set for yourself. And also during these times when everyone's routine has just been completely turned upside down, we would expect to see an increase in non-compliance. So it's okay. But I'm hoping to give you some strategies that you can adapt to your families to try to address that. So this is a picture of an alarm clock, and you might be thinking, like, what does this have to do with the topic? But think about your alarm clock and what feelings that brings up for you, what the noise of the alarm, like what do you feel when you hear your alarm go off? For me, my alarm is associated with these negative things. So I'm lying in my bed in this comfortable place, it's warm, I hear the alarm go off, it's jarring, it's waking me up, and it's signaling for me to get out of this bed, kind of into a cold room, and usually I'm starting my day by working out. So it's just like not paired with the most positive things. The reason why I brought this up is because a lot of times what happens for parents is it's really easy to get caught in this cycle where you're calling your child's name also becomes paired with all of these negative things. So when you call your kid's name, you're likely to be telling them something that they don't want to hear. So it's time to do this, or stop doing that, or don't do this. And your name there, when you're calling their name, it's constantly paired with that negative. It becomes a cue that something undesirable is about to happen. So we want to try to change that cycle and to switch that so that when you call their name, it's not always paired with this negative thing. We also want to pair it with some positives. So I'm going to show you a little exercise that you can practice at home. So first, we're going to start by just making a list of some of your child's favorite things. So if you have paper or you have a note section in your phone, go ahead and just jot down some of the things that your child really enjoys. These could be games or toys, but they don't even have to be tangible. It could just be a high five from you, or when you ruffle their hair, or kind of pat them on the back. Whatever it is that your child enjoys, make that list now. And I'll give you guys a minute to do that. Once you've thought of these things, if anyone is up for it, I'd love to see some of the ideas that you came up with, and you can throw them in the chat box. Knock knock jokes, awesome. Bike ride, yeah. These might be big things, they might be little, they might take a bunch of time, or they could be really fast. And I think that's what's so important to think about, is that what's on your list is going to be different than what's on someone else's list. So I love the ideas you guys are throwing in there. It's important to think about what's individualized for your child. And if you have multiple children, with lots of you do, what one child likes is probably different than what another child likes. Also, what one child likes is probably going to change over time, even throughout the day. So I'm someone, I like chocolate. And if I've been eating a lot of chocolate, I'm going to grow tired of it, and I'll want to switch it up for something else that's sweet. So if your child just gets satiated with the same thing over and over again, then that's going to lose its effect, and you'll want to find something else that they find enjoyable. But I think it's really helpful to actually have this list ready so that you know, okay, these are the things I can turn back to when I want to find things that my kid enjoys. So once you have that list, what I want you to do is set a goal for yourself. So I'll explain what the game is in a bit, but you're just going to decide how often do you think you can practice this with your child throughout the day. and come up with something that's realistic for you. So it might be, I just want to practice this once a day, or maybe you want to try it 5 times a day. Wherever it is for you, that's fine. When you're teaching this to your child, you want to teach them what you expect them to do when you call their name. And that's going to vary for each kid, what their skill set is, how old they are. But when you call their name, do you want them to look at you? Do you want them to stop what they're doing? Maybe you want some sort of a verbal response for older kids. You want them to acknowledge that, okay, yep, I heard you call my name. I'm paying attention now. Whatever that is, think about that. And that's what you're going to then practice with your child when you're playing this. So first you need to teach them, okay, when I call your name, this is what I want you to do. And you might need to show them. A lot of kids really like this when you have them play the role of the teacher. So they call your name and then you show them what you want them to do. And then you can switch roles. But you're just going to practice that throughout the day. And every time they respond, when they kind of exhibit that behavior that you want them to, that's when you want to give them something from that list that you made. And again, it doesn't have to be big. It could just be a form of verbal praise like, hey, thanks so much for looking at me. That's fine. But the goal here is to pair you calling their name with them attending, but them also getting something positive. And you're not following that by then telling them to do something that they don't want to do. So we want to switch calling their name, and for that to gain some more positive consequences than always having their name being paired with something negative. All right, I want to show you a quick video just so you can see what this will look like.
Sophia, that's a really nice copy. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so in this example, Sophia is coloring. Dad calls her name. She looks up at him, and then he just acknowledges, says, thanks for looking at me, and gives her a quick kiss on the forehead. This is a great example of what this can look like. Again, it does not have to take a long time. It's something that you should be able to just kind of do throughout the day. All right. Gonna move on. So we're gonna talk now about different phases when you're delivering an instruction. And I break this down into these 3 phases. So we're gonna take some time going through each of them. First, let's talk about what happens before you deliver the instruction. I almost think that this is the most important phase. So there are a couple things to keep in mind before you even tell your child to do whatever it is you need them to do. First, we want to keep in mind timing. So when are you delivering that instruction? If your kid is in the middle of his favorite TV show, and that's when you tell him to go feed the dog, it's probably not going to get the best results. So think about, is that something that could wait until later, until that TV show is done, perhaps? So it's timing, is just thinking critically about, okay, when are you delivering that instruction? The next one, I think this is really difficult for parents to do, but it has a really big payoff. So this is proximity, and it just means getting close to your child. So how often are you trying to get your kid to do something when you're in the kitchen and they're in another room playing and you're kind of just yelling at them from another room? That's really common. And there are going to be times when you don't have time to do anything else, and that's okay. But when you do have time to take a moment, step away from what you're doing, I highly recommend that you do this and just get close to your child, be within arm's reach if possible. And what that does is just sending that cue to your child that I'm going to give an instruction and that I expect you to follow through, and you're there to help them follow through, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Again, I know this can seem like a really big kind of burden, but oftentimes if you take the time out of whatever you're doing to get close to your child, this whole exchange will end up being much shorter, than if you tell them to do something while you're far away from them, and it ends up being this whole back and forth struggle that you're getting frustrated, they're getting frustrated, and you're not seeing those results. So when you can, get close to them. The last piece here is attention, and it's just making sure that you have their attention before you give that instruction. So often, you know, they're going to be doing something else before you tell them whatever it is you need them to do. If you're close to them, you can call their name. You can, let's say they're playing with toys, you can put your hand on top of theirs, or let's say they're driving around a truck, just put your hand kind of stopping the movement of the truck. Or if they're watching a TV show, it's okay to put it on pause. And this is just to make sure that you have their attention before you deliver the instruction, because if they're not paying attention, it's really not likely that they'll be able to follow whatever it is you tell them to do. Okay, the next phase is the actual delivery of the instruction. So when you're giving the instruction, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First is you want to make sure that you're using direct language. What that means is try to avoid asking questions. And this took me a really long time to learn. And I think parents really struggle with this because sometimes it doesn't sound natural, and you want to be polite with your child, which I still recommend. But when you ask a question, so can you pick up your toys? You're giving them the opportunity to either say no or to show you that they mean no by their body or through their behavior. So instead of asking, you want to tell them directly. So phrase it as a statement instead of a question. You can still say please, you don't have to be yelling at them. So it can still be a polite exchange. But when you give it as a statement, it's another signal to them that you expect them to listen and that you'll be following through. I'll tell you later on, we'll talk about when it is appropriate to ask a question instead. So that's the first one, is being direct. The others are being clear and concise. This will depend on the age of your child, but you want to make sure that you're using a kind of simple phrase if that's what your child understands. Even for teens, we might want them to do, let's say we want them to, I don't know, clean up whatever it is they're doing, wash their hands, and set the table for dinner. So we need them to do those 3 different things. Some kids, you might be able to give them all 3 at once. So, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and then Z. For others, you're going to need to break that down into each step is its own instruction. And you just, again, want to base that off of where your child is. So I'll give you a couple examples now. This first one, this is just the question. And again, when you ask it as a question, you're giving your child the opportunity to say no, which is okay. There's definitely a time and place for that. But if you want them to follow through, then try phrasing it as a statement instead. In this example, so what a mess. Wouldn't it be great if someone cleaned up? This is kind of indirect language. It's not clear who you're directing that towards or really what you are expecting of them. So we would want to phrase that differently. And here's just an example of multiple steps, and it's not really clear what you're expecting when. So instead of that, just really clean, simple phrases. So please put your trains away. Direct to the point. Okay. The next phase is what happens after you deliver the instruction. So the goal here is that your child will begin to follow the instruction within 5 seconds. What I see all the time is parent will ask their child to do something, their child doesn't respond, parent asks again, they don't respond, again, and then there's kind of just this escalation where the child is getting more upset and the parent is getting more upset. Instead, what we want to see happen is ideally after that first time, your child starts to listen. So if you put in place those things that we just talked about, where you get close to your child, you make sure you have their attention, you give it as a statement instead of a question, my guess is that you'll start to see an increase in their compliance and they'll start listening more. If they do, and you kind of experience that success, you want to be providing praise. So we want to be paying attention to our child's successes, because we want to make sure that we're giving them more attention when they listen than when they don't. This is really common, and I see this happen a lot of times in families where parents find themselves responding to their children when they're doing something they don't want them to do, instead of responding to them when they're doing those positive things, those behaviors that we want to see them do. So we want to try to switch that. When you're giving praise, it doesn't have to be extravagant, but just a simple, nice job cleaning up, or hey buddy, I love how you cleaned up so quickly, whatever language feels natural for you. Also, you want to think back to that list of activities that I had you guys make at the beginning. If you ask your child to do something that's difficult for them and they do it, give them a little bit more than praise. So you want to acknowledge that success and that you saw them listen. So it's okay to reward those behaviors that you want to see happen again. If you ask them to do something really difficult, then your reinforcement, or kind of what that positive thing, that fun thing you do with them afterwards, should also be bigger than if you just ask them to do something simple. Then a simple, hey, nice job, thanks for doing that, would be fine. Okay, so we're gonna watch another example here. Let's see.
Sophia, can you please clean up your train tracks?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can say thank you, I can say thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't care. Daddy, look. Look, Daddy, look.
Good job. High five. High five. Way to go. Thanks for cleaning up your train tracks, Soph.
Welcome, Dad.
So things that I really like from this. So first, I don't know if you could hear, but when Sophia started to clean up, Dad said, thanks. And Sophia said, you don't say thank you, I say thank you, which is very typical 3-year-olds kind of exerting their control. And Dad just said, okay, and kind of moved on. It didn't turn into this battle. So that's just picking your battles. And the goal here was to get her to clean up. So that's what we were focusing on. And then after Sophia cleaned up her toys, her train tracks, Dad acknowledged it. He gave her a high five and said, thank you for cleaning up your toys. So what we saw there was this point, it was specific. So it wasn't just a general like, hey, nice job. Dad actually told Sophia what he saw that he really liked. You did a great job cleaning up your train tracks. Other things to keep in mind when you're providing praise is you want to give it as quickly as you can after that behavior. And again, we've talked about this, but just keep in mind that the more difficult tasks should get higher levels of reinforcement. You can also fade reinforcement over time, but the thing to keep in mind is you don't want to turn into that alarm clock. So you don't want calling their name or telling them to do something to always be paired with something negative. So every now and then you want to provide that praise for when they are listening. Okay, so all of that is probably you're thinking, yeah, that's fine and dandy, but like what happens when my kid doesn't listen when I tell them to do something, which you're still going to see. So we're going to talk about that next. This, I just think is, can have a really big impact on your interactions with your child. And it's just to take a moment to pause, notice, and choose. And this also came from Lisa Coyne. And I just think it's such a great tool for all of us to use in our interactions. So the first is to pause. And this is where you're taking a moment and stopping that cycle that might typically happen where you ask your child to do something, they don't, and you respond immediately. So to break up that cycle or that chain, just take a moment to pause. It doesn't have to be long. And then notice, how are you feeling? Where are you at that day? Maybe you're starting to feel your heart beat faster, or maybe you can feel your body start to tense up and you can tell that you're getting frustrated. Also, notice where your child's at. Are they having a really difficult day and just not listening to anything that you're telling them to do? That's still going to happen. So when you notice what's going on for you and your child, you're giving yourself the opportunity to then take control over the situation and for you to decide how you want to respond. You might say, you know what, I'm having a really tough day right now, and you recognize that you just don't have the energy to follow through, and that's okay. You could tell your child, you could choose to say, let's say you needed them to set the table. So you say, so-and-so, I need you to set the table. They don't do it. You pause, notice where you're at, and if you're not going to follow through or it's not really a big deal, you can say, you know what, I changed my mind. You don't need to set the table, I'll do it. That's okay to do, and now you've just kind of diffused that situation. Or it might be one of those days where you just don't have it in you to get into that back and forth, and you can feel yourself kind of about to yell, and you decide that you need a break from that situation. That's okay too. You could say to your child, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm going to go take a break. And you remove yourself from that situation. That's fine. You might also realize that, okay, I'm feeling good. I have the energy to follow through, and you're making the choice to then follow through on that instruction that you delivered. If that's where you're at, I'm going to show you those steps next. But again, I think it's just really important for you to take a moment for yourself, notice where you're at, and then to make that choice of how you're going to respond and not beat yourself up over that choice that you made. If you are making the choice that you need a break, that's great. You should then feel really good that you made that choice and you recognize that you didn't have it in you to get into that back and forth. Okay. So if you do decide to follow through, we'll talk about what that looks like. So again, keep in mind that there are going to be times where no matter how much you prepare or you follow all those steps we went over, your child still doesn't listen. Take a deep breath, try to stay calm, and this is what it can look like. So let's go back to the setting the table. You would give your instructions. So, hey bud, it's time to set the table. He doesn't do it. I'm going to wait about 5 seconds to see if he responds or not. If he doesn't, I'm going to repeat that instruction and then guide him to do whatever it is I asked him to do. So if I said, hey bud, it's time to set the table, he doesn't do it, I would say, I need you to set the table because we're about to eat. And I might pair that with a gesture prompt for him to come to the table. Or maybe I'm close to him and I put my hand on his back or his shoulder and I'm guiding him towards the table. You're basically giving him whatever level of guidance he needs to start getting it done. And that's showing him, okay, you're going to follow through on whatever it is you've asked him to do. Once he starts engaging in that activity, then you would acknowledge that and give that verbal praise, but you don't want your praise to be as high as it is if they did it, if they listened the first time. This works really well for young kids or when you know you're not going to get into a physical battle. I'll talk about another strategy for older kids in a moment, but let me just show you what this can look like. All right.
I'm sorry to hear that. Let's try to clean up, please. Put that truck.
going down.
That's not gonna happen.
I'm sorry to hear your energy is going down. Please put the truck in your toy bin. Thank you.
Enough, buddy.
That's a good job. That's a great job. Please put it in your toy bin. Benjamin, put the... Okay, I see a few more things that need to be put away. Good job, bud. Yep, there's a few more things that need to be cleaned up, right? You're doing great. Good job. Thank you for cleaning up. We'll put it back, put it where it goes. Good job. Thank you very much for cleaning up.
So I love that exchange. Mom persists in it, and afterwards she says, I love how you cleaned up. So she's giving him that specific praise. This example, Mom uses a point, but she also gets close to him. So actually we can look at it. The sound isn't that great anyways. And I'll just show you where she goes over to him and guides him.
And then I want you to do the toys that are in the grass.
So she says, I need you to do the toys that are in the grass. She's pointing to the toys that she needs him to clean up. She's walking over there. And right there you can see he started walking away, but she just got him and guided him to where she needed him to go. So that's just what that guidance looks like. And it's showing him, I gave you that instruction and I'm expecting you to follow it, and I'm going to follow through until you do. All right. So we talked about how that's a great strategy to use for younger kids, but your kids might be older, or you might be worried that if you're guiding them, that they might start to get physically aggressive or engage in some disruptive behavior. If that's the case, there are other strategies for you to use. One of them is just waiting it out. I really like this strategy as well. I think it can work great for older kids. And what's happening here is you give your instruction, and if your child doesn't comply with it, so if they don't start listening within 5 seconds, then I'm going to remove access as much as I can to anything fun. So if they're watching TV, I'm going to pause it. If they're playing with a toy, I'm going to try to take that. And I'm not going to give a lot of attention here. All I'm going to do is tell them what I need them to do. I might pair that with a point, and I'm just going to wait until they start following that instruction. I might need to remind them about once a minute. The frequency there can vary based on the age of your child and how much attention you want to be giving them during this time. But I really recommend that you minimize the amount of attention you're giving them during this time, and you're just waiting until they start to listen. So you want to do this when you know you have the time to wait them out. If you don't have the time and you just got to get it done, that's when I would go back to the guidance strategy. If you're using the wait it out, so you're not talking to them except to remind them of what it is you need them to do. And then once they start to complete that instruction, provide them with some acknowledgement. So, okay, thank you for starting to clean up. So it tells them, like, I see you doing what I asked you to do. Thank you. All righty. So what does this look like, and kind of how can you guys actually take what I've been going through and start to practice it? What I want you to do is to make a list of 10 instructions. So what you're going to do is start your list with things that are super easy for your children to do now. So it might be, come here and get the snack, or high five, or sit down and play with your toy. Like, these are instructions that you know when you give it, your kids are going to listen. And then through your list, gradually start to build in instructions that are more difficult. So by the end of your list, you might have an instruction for them to complete an activity that's non-preferred. So turn off the TV and wash your hands. So that list goes from things that are really easy to ones that are more complicated or more difficult for them to do. Take a moment now to write those instructions down. For anyone that wants to share, I'd love to see some of your easy instructions that you're coming up with. So you can put those in the chat. Come get a goldfish cracker. That's awesome. Yeah, it's something that they probably like goldfish crackers, and you know that they're going to respond to that. Way to go. That's great. Sit down and do ABC mouse. Yep, ABC mouse is popular. A lot of kids really like that. Nice. So these, again, are easy instructions that you think they're likely to listen to. And on that list, then you'll have more difficult instructions towards the end. And what I recommend doing is taking some time to practice this. If this is an area that you guys really struggle with, and start off with those things that are really easy for your child to do, but you want to practice them so that you can get more comfortable with some of the strategies we've talked about. So you're getting more comfortable with getting close to your child before you deliver the instruction, or gaining their attention, or delivering it as a statement instead of a question. Or maybe you want to get comfortable with giving that reinforcement or that praise after they listen. Do that with these easy instructions so that you're building up your confidence, and your child is also learning what you are expecting of them and that you'll be following through. And as you get comfortable with that, then you can start to build in some of the more difficult or complex instructions that they might be less likely to follow. All right. What I want to remind you guys of before we wrap this up is it's important to know your limits and to be patient with yourself. So again, there are going to be days where you just don't have the energy or the time to follow through with your instructions. That's okay. If you're having one of those days, this is when I recommend that you go back to asking those questions. So ask your child to do things instead of telling them, and you're giving them that opt-out. They can choose to do it or they can choose not to, but you've kind of taken control of that situation because you're acknowledging, I don't have the energy to follow through today. And I think the biggest one here is that you're not feeling badly about that decision that you're made, and you're kind of owning it and feeling good that you were able to recognize that you weren't in a place to follow through. Okay. Let's talk about what this looks like, just to remind you when we put it all together. So first was pair calling their name with reinforcement. So you want to make sure that you're pairing, when you call their name, you're pairing that with something fun, with positive things, instead of always these negative things or things that they don't like. The next is, before you deliver that instruction, move closer to your child and get their attention. So this stage is really critical, and I recommend that you take the time to do this. It will make that whole sequence be much shorter. When you're delivering the instruction, try to be direct, so give it as a statement instead of as a question, using clear and concise language. And then at the end, you want to kind of close out that sequence. So if your child followed the instruction, give them praise. Let them know that you acknowledge that they did whatever it is you asked them to. That's when you want to be giving them the attention. If they don't follow through, then wait it out, or you can guide them to completion, and you're just minimizing attention until they complete that instruction. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want you to think about everything we went over and try to pick something, maybe just one, that an action item that you are going to commit to this week. And again, it doesn't have to be anything big. So maybe your commitment to yourself is you really want to try practicing some of those breathing exercises while you're folding the laundry. That's awesome. Or maybe you want to try to play the name game. Maybe you're deciding, actually, I want to pay attention to how close I am to my child when I'm delivering that instruction. Or you want to try to phrase your instructions as a statement instead of a question. Whatever it is, try to write down something that you're going to commit to during this week. Also want to acknowledge, like, you might be in a space where you just can't take on anything else, and that's okay too. Your commitment then is to be practicing that self-compassion, be gentle with yourself, and to recognize that you can't take on anything else. That's all right. Okay, so I'll give you guys a moment to write that down. Anna, thanks for putting that in the chat. I see you're committing to the name game. Great. Carolyn put using a statement rather than a question. Great idea, Carolyn. Holly's going to get closer during the delivery. So you guys are coming up with great ideas. And again, you're all in different places. You need to individualize this for yourself, for your family, and for whatever else is going on in your world right now. And just acknowledge that and accept that. All right, I will get to your questions. I just want to thank you before I open it up for questions. I so appreciate you all taking the time out of your incredibly busy days to join me. And just want to put it out there that if this felt like a lot, or maybe you were really interested in what I was saying, but couldn't figure out what that would actually look like for your family, it's okay to reach out to people for support. I offer one-on-one coaching sessions. They can be done online. If that's something you're interested in, my contact information is up there. But also reach out to your peers, reach out to friends or other people for support during this time. So just want to close off again by thanking everyone who joined today. It was a great group. And again, if you have follow-up questions or want to learn more about how to individualize this for your family, don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope you all are staying safe and doing well. All right, take care.